Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast.
It's great to be back. And we're diving into material that I think really addresses one of the single biggest complaints we hear in modern organizations.
Which is what?
Slow decision-making
Yeah.
and, just completely blurred accountability. Who owns what?
Oh, absolutely. And that's exactly what our mission is today, right? A deep dive into a pretty advanced organizational system that's designed to eliminate those exact pain points.
Yeah.
We're exploring a fully flat, rule-based approach, and we're pulling insights from the Holacracy adoption source material. This isn't just, throwing out the org chart for chaos.
Not at all.
It's about replacing those implicit power structures with explicit rules and trading old-school job titles for roles with genuine built-in autonomy.
And that core shift is what makes this so relevant right now.
Yeah.
The market just moves too fast for decisions to stack up on one person's desk.
Yep.
When ownership is ambiguous, teams just stall. And companies today are really wrestling with complexity, with remote work, and just the sheer need for speed. They need a system that genuinely aligns everyone around a purpose without adding another layer of middle management.
Exactly. The source material argues that the solution is actually more structure, not less, but it's a different kind of structure.
Right. It's structure in the form of clear, almost legalistic governance rather than a top-down hierarchy.
The core promise being that by putting autonomy right into the roles themselves, you trade that vague managerial guidance for a clear, predictable operating system.
It's a complete overhaul of where authority actually lives. It moves it away from a person's personality or their seniority and anchors it directly into the work itself. And that change, that shift in where authority lives, it fundamentally alters how people interact day to day.
Okay, so let's unpack the machine itself. We're getting rid of titles and moving to roles. What does that fundamental building block even look like?
Well, the foundational change is that switch from titles to roles. A traditional job title like, say, senior marketing coordinator, it's often really vague.
Totally.
It's based on the person holding it, and it rarely defines their actual scope. A role, in this context, is a defined unit of work. It comes with an explicit purpose, a set of accountabilities, and domains it has exclusive control over.
So it makes responsibilities visible, actionable,
And instantly verifiable.
So if I have an issue, I'm not hunting for the right person. I'm looking up a directory to find the right role. That cuts through a lot of political maneuvering right away.
It does. And the entire system rests on a shared rule book, which they call the Constitution.
Yeah, and that word sounds a bit intimidating, doesn't it? A constitution.
It does. But we're talking about a pretty brief document. The source mentions version 5 is only about, 15 pages. It's not some hefty legal tome. It's a crisp, operational framework.
But wait, how does having a rigid rulebook give you more freedom? That sounds a little counterintuitive.
Think of it like a professional sport. You need clearly defined lines on the field, rules about fouls, and consistent ways to handle disputes.
Okay.
Those rules don't constrain the player's ability to be creative within the game. They actually enable fair and predictable play. The Constitution defines the rules for creating roles, for running meetings, for resolving conflicts. It ensures everyone has predictable space to act without needing to ask for permission.
So it gives people clear guardrails, so they can stop asking for permission and just start acting on purpose.
Exactly. The rules define the process, but the organization fills in the content.
That makes sense. Okay, so let's look at the structure that holds these roles together. We're talking about circles and domains.
Right, so circles are the organizational architecture. They're basically nested teams, grouping related roles that have shared aims, often focused on delivering a specific product or a service.
And this nesting helps reduce overlap, I imagine.
Yeah, and keeps it manageable. But the real engine of autonomy here, and you could argue it's the most powerful concept in the whole framework, is the domain.
Domains are so critical, but I think they're often misunderstood. What precisely does a domain grant a role?
It grants exclusive control, total control over a specific asset, a decision-making area, or a process. The classic example is the website manager role having the domain over the company website.
Meaning they are the only role that can make changes to it.
The only one. They set the policies, they use the asset. It's a deliberate mechanism to stop internal turf wars and just make ownership crystal clear.
Okay, let's really drill down on that, the consequence of that exclusivity. The source says that if a role holds a domain, even the highest-ranking executive like the CEO has to submit a request. They have to respect those boundaries.
Exactly. And this is where the power culture fundamentally shifts. In a traditional hierarchy, The CEO just overrides the website manager, period.
Of course.
But here, the power is tied to the domain, not the title. So if the CEO wants a high-priority strategic update, they prioritize the work for that role, they allocate resources. But they can't just unilaterally go into the website's code or change its policies.
Not without the domain holder's consent or...
Or triggering a formal governance process
Mhm.
to actually change the domain itself.
So the framework forces the conversation out of that political back and forth and into the operational. Instead of, I'm the boss, just do this, it becomes, my strategic circle needs this done. How do we use your domain to achieve our purpose?
Precisely. It protects the integrity and autonomy of the work. It prevents those hidden overrides that just derail specialized work. And if the domain holder is acting against the organization's purpose, the solution isn't a top-down override.
It's using the formal change mechanism.
Which is governance.
Okay, let's talk governance. Organizations are living things, right? Roles and domains have to evolve constantly. How does the system handle change without just creating, bureaucratic paralysis?
Governance is the system's evolution engine, and it's decentralized. That means anyone holding a role can start the process to propose an update. Anyone. To add a new role, change a domain, modify a policy, whenever they experience what the system calls a tension, a gap between how things are and how they could be to serve the purpose.
But if anyone can propose changes, what stops it from becoming chaos? Couldn't one unhappy person just object to everything?
That's where the specific definition of an objection is so critical. An objection is not a personal veto. It's not a way to block a change just because you like the old way better.
So what is a valid objection?
The only valid objection is if the proposal would actually create harm, move the organization backward, or step on an existing domain without consent. It's a safety check, not a preference poll.
I see. So objections force clarification, they force modifications to make the change safe, but they can't just stop progress based on a personal disagreement.
And that speeds up adaptation hugely. It fundamentally changes the meeting culture. Governance meetings become these rapid focus sessions just for processing tensions and integrating small, frequent improvements instead of having those rare, massive, and really disruptive reorganizations.
That structural clarity is a perfect bridge to our second section, which is all about why this really matters for the individual and for the business. For the employee, the system promises true autonomy, but with guardrails.
Right. It means you gain real, codified authority to act and interpret your role within those defined boundaries. You stop operating based on vague expectations and start having your authority literally written down in a public directory.
So you're empowered to make purpose-driven decisions without needing a long sign-off chain.
Yes, and crucially, the sources highlight the concept of safe refusals.
Talk to us about that. What does a safe refusal look like in practice?
This is a huge shift. Because your accountabilities are explicit, if a colleague or even a former manager asks for something that's totally outside your defined roles, you can offer a safe refusal.
You can just say no.
You can say no, and it's not based on a personality conflict. It's backed by the rules of cooperation that are defined in the Constitution.
That feels like it combats that epidemic of scope creep, where the best performers just keep taking on more and more work because they feel like they can't say no.
Exactly. That shift from asking permission to just making a decisive, purpose-aligned action, it really sharpens accountability.
And that clarity has to fundamentally change the role of a leader, right? It sounds like it could be the end of micromanagement.
It is. The role known as the circle lead is explicitly defined as a strategic role, not a traditional people manager.
We've all had that manager who just had to tell you what font to use on a slide. How does the circle lead avoid that trap? What is their actual mandate?
The circle lead leads strategically. They're the resource allocator, the priority setter. Their key jobs are assigning people to roles within the circle, setting strategic priorities, allocating resources like budget or time, and removing blockers.
Okay, and to keep that clarity, what are they explicitly not allowed to do?
They absolutely do not dictate how the job is done. That's the role holder's autonomy. And crucially, they don't handle hiring, firing, or compensation.
Oh, that's interesting. Those functions are held in separate roles.
Exactly, often within a more general company circle.
Why is that separation of HR functions so important?
It keeps the focus purely on the work and the purpose. If your circle lead doesn't control your salary or your career path, your relationship with them becomes much more operational and transactional. It's about executing the role effectively, not subjective personal management.
Strategy and explicit accountabilities replace those informal directives.
Exactly. And this changes how teams meet, too.
How so?
The framework makes a sharp distinction between tactical meetings and governance meetings. Tacticals are short, triage-focused, and they only deal with immediate operational issues, metrics, and blockers.
So they avoid becoming status theater, where everyone just recites what they did last week for an hour.
Precisely. If there are no immediate tensions to process, the meeting is often canceled or it ends in 5 minutes. Governance meetings are then strictly for evolving the structure-changing roles, policies, domains. By keeping those separate, you ensure tactical work stays fast and structural evolution is deliberate.
I appreciate that the source material also brings up scale. Does this framework only work for, small, nimble startups? Or can it genuinely scale?
The sources are pretty clear on this. Yeah. The rule-based system is adaptable and reusable. It scales because the structure isn't prescriptive about the content of the work, only the process for defining it.
The framework is empty until you fill it.
Right. You can spin up new circles and roles using the exact same constitutional process, whether you're a team of 10 or 10,000. It scales structure without creating new organizational debt.
So for the average employee, the result is just clarity. Accountability is sharp, boundaries are visible, and I know exactly who to talk to without playing email chain roulette.
That's the practical benefit, yeah. You check a directory, you see the rules accountabilities, and you know who does what instantly. It dramatically reduces friction and interruptions.
Okay, now that we get the structure and the benefits, let's look at adoption. For a listener thinking about this, how does an organization actually implement it without falling into a trap of over-engineering?
The core advice is to treat the system as a toolbox, not a rigid blueprint. You don't just flip a switch. You have to plan for a real learning journey.
What does that mean?
It means those governance meetings, at first, will feel slow. They'll feel awkward. People are learning to use formal rules instead of intuition or hierarchy. You have to budget time for that initial inefficiency, knowing the payoff is faster, clearer decisions down the road.
So what's a practical way to start? Where do you begin practicing?
Start small. Pilot one circle. Choose a team where the pain points are really high right now. Blurred accountability, decision bottlenecks, that kind of thing.
And then just run the process.
Run governance rounds on real tensions. Define some early, high-impact roles and domains. The goal isn't perfection right away. It's just building muscle memory for that decentralized change process.
So you're modeling governance as the organization's evolution engine. Small, frequent updates are better than big, rare ones. What's the biggest psychological hurdle in all this?
It's unlearning the old assumptions about power. The hardest shift is convincing executives that giving up their implicit authority, their ability to just override a decision, actually results in a more robust, adaptive, and faster organization. You have to train people to substitute clear process for political leverage.
So it's less about installing software and more about a cultural change that's backed by formal rules.
Precisely. You're standardizing the language of communication and decision-making, so every interaction has a predictable outcome, no matter who's in the room.
This deep dive really synthesizes the strategic value then. The system offers a kind of predictable freedom to experiment safely within clear boundaries. The value is in turning that vague, informal power into clear, shared processes that just let everyone move faster.
It's a mechanism for continuous alignment and adaptation. It keeps decisions decentralized, close to the people who are actually doing the work. And in today's market, that's critical for survival.
That's powerful. Now, as we wrap up, let's leave our listener with one final provocative thought to consider, building on everything we've talked about today.
Okay. So we discussed how the circle lead doesn't control your hiring or compensation, which creates a focus purely on role execution. If your accountability is explicit and visible in the roles themselves, and it's enforced by rules, not by personality or status, what previously invisible assumption about power or authority will you need to consciously unlearn about your own behavior to truly thrive in a structure where your career advancement is decoupled from the person who assigns your daily tasks?
A fascinating concept to ponder, especially as work moves towards more transparency and autonomy. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into decentralized authority.
My pleasure.
And thank you for tuning in to the SmartKeys podcast. If you want to explore the specific accountabilities, the definition of circles, the mechanics of safe refusals, and all those constitution details, we strongly encourage you to read the full source article for yourself. The link is right there in the show notes.
And please subscribe to the SmartKeys podcast for more insights on the future of work, productivity strategies, and how to stay ahead in a fast-moving professional world.
Until next time, keep diving deep.